Hi guys, welcome to the channel. Look, with more and more people getting into downwinding, I am constantly getting asked the question, how do I get into it? Is it difficult? And what's the best way of being able to get success as quickly as possible? So sit down, relax, and we'll get straight into it. Like with always, please like and subscribe. The channel really helps me do more content like this. All right, without further ado, let's get straight into it. Okay, so I want to start off by discussing gear. Look, this is so important in the early stages. I'd go as far as to say you could actually buy skills with having the correct gear. And likewise, if you have the incorrect gear, you are going to make it so difficult for yourself. Okay, so let's start with the all-important board. In terms of length, we want something around 7'10" to 8 foot. I'd say no more than that for learning. And then in terms of width, you're looking between 20 and 23 inches wide. For volume, look, if you're 80 kilos, you're looking for something around 120 liters to learn on. Now, obviously that's plus or minus. If you're a little bit more, 85 to 90, then I'd go up to 125 to 130. And likewise, 75 to 70, you could probably drop down to 115, 110, something like that. Okay, so for foil choice, look, a lot has changed in this last year. At the beginning, it was all about the big pump foils because you can get gratification really early by paddling them up onto flat water. That's all well and good, but as soon as you start putting those really big ones into the ocean, one, they don't turn very well, and two, they don't keep up with the big rolling swells. Nowadays, brands are bringing out bigger size, downwind dedicated foils, and I think these are the go for. I reckon in size, something around 1400 for your average 80 kilo person. That is a perfect foil to be able to learn to paddle straight, perhaps even flat water paddle up. That's not important. We'll get onto that in a minute, but it will be really good as soon as you get out into the ocean or the bumps that you're using. Mast, there's lots of chat about this. My personal preference is an 80 centimeter mast. I find that works perfectly, but a lot of people do use a 75, so anywhere in between that. Okay, so let's move now on to the technique of paddling, the all important and where the focus will lie at the beginning. So first off, you're gonna have to learn to paddle straight, and that actually took me a surprisingly long period of time. So the technique, the key to it is to keep the paddle vertical. You may hear lots of people talking about J strokes and C strokes, and that's all well and good, but when you need cadence and you're putting down loads of effort, that kind of all goes out the window. As long as your paddle is vertical as you're putting down the power, you will paddle straight. One element that helped me do that was keeping the paddle in and around my forehead. This is the area that your paddle wants to be, not over here. So keep it within your eye line at all times, and that tends to keep the shaft really straight. When you're putting the paddle into the water, it needs to go all the way in. You don't want any of that blade to be showing. It wants to be nice and deep. So with that in mind, when I'm placing the paddle into the water for the catch, I want to be putting the blade right next to the nose of the board. That's where the blade needs to go, as far forward as possible. That means a very straight bottom arm with a bent top arm. So you may have heard the expression nose to toes. Well, that's talking about keeping the paddle in between the nose of the board and your back foot. You do not want to be going past that. It's inefficient. I think it's really important that we emphasize cadence over power. And what I mean by that is the more strokes you can do, the better. Yes, power is important, but not at the sacrifice of the rate at which you're doing it. And then lastly, I want you to think about putting the paddle in and going diagonally down as opposed to backwards. That diagonally down motion, you can almost pivot around your bottom hand to be able to get forward. You're almost trying to plant the paddle and then pull yourself past the paddle as opposed to pulling water backwards. That's quite a good analogy, and again, that worked really well for me. So obviously you're going to be doing this in flat water, which lends itself to the flat water paddle up, the infamous. Look, it is a really good, important stage, but it's not critical. You don't need to be able to flat water paddle up to be able to get up in bumps. What is important in that flat water stage is you learn to pump the board off the water. It's really important that you combine the two together, and that's what makes a successful paddle up, especially in flat water. Pumping the board off the water at the same time as putting down the power stroke is critical. Timing is everything. You can practice this by not paddling at all and just trying to get forward motion on the board by pumping and moving your hips forward as you go. Then start introducing the paddle, combine the two, and you'll get the results, I guarantee. Okay, so we're feeling comfortable in flat water. It's time now to move into the ocean and start getting those infamous paddle ups in the bumps. Trust me, you'll find it easier. So when do you start to paddle to catch these bumps? Well, first off, it's important to know that you're not paddling for the big rolling swells. I made that mistake. You're never gonna catch them. You'll never be able to paddle fast enough in those early stages. What you're after is the wind chop, the really steep chop. The steeper, the better. So the key to it is patience. You have to wait until the right bump comes along. You need to position yourself so that everything is aligned for that split second to start paddling. You will know when that's right when the nose of the board rises rapidly, much more than it has been on the last 2-3 minutes. Because straight away afterwards you'll have a pitch down, and that's the point at which you want to be full speed. So as the nose rises, which you will find a little bit unbalancing, that's when you want to start stroking and really start thinking about accelerating. The first 2 strokes I would recommend being at sort of 50%. If you go full on the first couple of strokes, what tends to happen is the nose of the board will veer off to either the left or the right, depending on which side you're paddling from. So I found 1 or 2 just gentle strokes and then really start putting the power down thereafter, combining the pumping and everything else we've talked about. It's important to always look forward. Yes, it's really tempting to look back at the bumps and see and pick, but you don't want to be looking for bumps because it's too late by the time you've seen it. You've just got to feel that real rapid nose up, and that's the point at which you go for it. Yes, you won't get it right first time. In fact, you probably won't get it right the first 50 times, but after a while you get a really good feeling for which bumps to go for and which don't. And then lastly, you've got everything right. The timing was bang on, the bump was great. The key to it is just to keep paddling. Do not stop until you are really high up on the mast and you're comfortable and you're gliding. That's really important. I see too many people stop paddling when the board just comes out the water, and that can be the difference between just getting over that downhill or not. So we're now on the right kit. We can do some flat water paddling around straight, just about releasing the board, and we can actually paddle up onto bumps. The next thing, which is probably the hardest, is reading the ocean, reading the bumps and staying up on foil. So the reason why this is so hard, because it's very difficult to teach it, because you really just got to go out and experience it. But I can give you some top tips which help me. So it's really important to know that this is not like surfing a wave. You're not just riding continuous swells, which what it looks like from an outsider. What you're doing is just jumping from one bump to the other, looking for a pathway. It's a maze and you've got to find the way of being able to get through it. Yes, the idea is to ride the downslope of the bumps the whole time, but the reality of it is if you aim for those, you'll end up coming off the back. So what I do is I aim for the trough of the wave, and that way by the time I'm there, I'm sat in pretty much the power zone, where the most energy is of that bump the whole time. I stay there for probably only a matter of seconds before I'm looking at jumping off and getting on to the next one. As soon as you start having fun on one of these bumps, it's time to come off it and start looking for another one. If you stay on it too long, you'll end up going out off the back and it'll all be game over. So obviously we're not going to get this right all the time, and every time we fall we've got to paddle up, which takes a lot of energy, and this cycle continues. So one of the best ways of being able to learn to read the bumps is using your downwind kit. So the wing you'd use for paddling up, the board, everything, and get the smallest wing you can physically get up on and use that. You've got to be really rigid and strict with yourself that you don't grab the wing and start winging it when you run out of power. You've got to put it behind you, forget about it, and if you're going to come off the wave, accept that and fall in and start again. Do not pick up the wing and start using that as power. That's cheating, and that won't teach you to read the bumps. Another really important point is you won't find the answers downwind. What I mean by that is you won't be able to, at the early stages, up and over waves and go down and up and over. Although you do see all the pros do that, your world is behind you. So when you find yourself running out of energy or options and start panic pumping, one of the best things you can do is turn back into wind and allow another wave to come, or another bump, sorry, to come, and you can pick that up. The early stages, there is a huge amount of turning involved, going up and down and cross and you name it, which is, again, it's why, going back to the wing choice, the foil choice, it's really important you have a foil that's easy to turn and maneuver, even though it might be slightly harder to paddle up in the flats. And lastly, it's super important you stay high on your mast. That's where the foil is most efficient, and efficiency is the key to downwinding. Look, I know it's going to be a long and testing journey, but trust me, it's definitely worth it in the end. Downwinding is by far and away my favorite discipline, so stick with it and you will get there. If you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me and I'll get back to you as soon as possible.